the broadband issue was the biggest failure of the Fianna Fáil, apart from the banks. But wasn't there a Green Minister in charge of that department? And secondly, is this the first time that the Labour Party has proposed that a private sector capitalist company could solve an urgent national problem?
First of all, Fianna Fáil have been in power for the last, let's call it 14 years now for the sake of the campaign. I know there's some issues about whether it's 13 years or 14 years, so let's settle on 14. It's closer to 14 now.
Feels like 14 years.
Yes, it's closer to 14 now.
For something I didn't
just for the remainder of the campaign, by God, let's settle on 14. There's been a Green Minister in this particular portfolio for the last 3 of that, call it. So yeah, they'd obviously have to share, I think, a proportion of the blame. The point I'm making really is that, when you think about the period of time from when Labour was last in government in 1997 and the period of economic growth that we had over, let us say, a decade, I think the failure to deliver on broadband has been a huge failure on the part of government. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's one of the legacies that we have now been left with by Fianna Fáil, that we're, as a country, we're at the bottom of the league table in terms of broadband. Fianna Fáil have kept clapping themselves on the back that we're a modern country. If they've devoted as much energy to addressing the needs of broadband as they did to the daft idea of trying to get electronic voting machines into polling stations, we'd have been a lot better, a lot better off and a lot further advanced. As regards the establishment of a private company, the Labour Party believes that it is the role of government to work with the private sector to develop and to grow our economy. I think there has been a rather old-fashioned idea that government should stay out of economic activity, and that everything should be left to the private sector to do it on its own. We saw the failure of that pretty spectacularly in relation to banks. There is a role for government in the economy. It is not a role where government replaces the private sector. It is a role where government works with the private sector. This is an area where we believe that private sector investment can deliver the broadband that is required, but the role of government is to work with the private sector to ensure that the necessary structures are in place to enable the private sector to do that.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Just catch that story that we all online on your properties. It's built massively in Fine Gael or plan post-date a really good approach in the name. That's the kind of caption in Blanche or Montage of the go into Sun Kayla kind of capital.
Well, ar dús rinne siad Jarmat mar an ráite bhí agan inné is faoi forbert agus bailí chun inéistíocht nua dhéanamh a bhí mar a glua. Ní a bheith an plán omláin de fostíocht a bhí agan inné. Tá bhí cuid don phlean sin inné, tá cuid eile inniu faoi Banna Lehan. Agus by cuidera a machanseo. An béim an tálacht eibra chur in san táchanseo, ná go gafar daine a chur leis gabar, go gafar fostíocht nua a chrothú, go gahamid trádáil leis na tíortha nua, áiticha ina bhfuil an nachnaíocht ag fás agus bine an ráite bhí agan inné.
Eamon, similar question, I think. There's been a lot of criticism from Fine Gael of various policy initiatives. Clearly there's clear blue water opening up between yourselves and potential coalition partners. On the other hand, Jerry Adams is starting to love bomb news, talking about unity on the left and all that sort of stuff. Why are you committed to a strategy which looks like delivering the Tánaist's job at best, instead of going for a more radical alternative?
Well, first of all, I don't know where you got the latter idea. The Labour Party has been very clear that our objective in this election is to lead the next government, and we're going to set out right throughout the campaign Labour's very distinct view on various issues. There have been two areas of difference, I think, that have been identified by Fine Gael since our statement yesterday. The first is in relation to employment. First of all, the document that we issued yesterday is, of course, not Labour's full policy on jobs and unemployment. The document we published yesterday was the part of that strategy which deals with enterprise and innovation. There's another part of that strategy today, and we will continue to set out the different elements of Labour's job strategy during the course of the campaign. Secondly, I think that the comments that were made this morning by Richard Bruton, I think, are old-fashioned. This idea that the government has no role in the economy, that's an old-fashioned economic idea, which is largely responsible for getting us where we are. The idea that the private sector should be let free to do whatever it wishes, and if it doesn't do it, well and good. We have two classic examples of where that has failed. The first is in relation to banking, the lack of regulation and the lack of government handling of that. The second area is in this very area on broadband, where for the past number of years it has been left to the private sector to deliver broadband. It hasn't happened. The Labour Party's view is that the role of government is not to replace the private sector, not to do what the private sector